In this week's episode, the boys cover some certifications, which ones are kind of more relevant than other ones, and kind of a path to get on track to your in-service and or welding inspector career. So let's sit back, relax, enjoy, and see how this one goes. Scott, we're back for another episode.
Frank, we made it. Burning the midnight oil, but we made it.
We are. We're still joined by our esteemed guest, Matt.
Good evening, boys.
Still feeling good?
I'm feeling good, yeah. Thanks.
Good. Scott and I are a little tired. I think we just got off turnaround there. And Scott apparently might have the Rona there.
It sounds like it. Jeez.
Scott, I know you've been looking forward to doing this episode about certifications, and I think almost on every job that we're at, and Matt, you might be able to contest to this as well, a lot of the trade guys always ask us how we got into inspection and what certifications we have, even though they may not quite understand what the certifications we have are, right? What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, and what certs should you have too, right? That's all pretty relevant information. Some of this is a bit of a progression thing, and some of it isn't, right? You may want to stick with one niche your whole life, or you may want to progress to other things. I don't mean progress like one's better than the other. It's just different avenues. So I think that's what we're going to kind of lay out. We'll start with one area, you know, what people should have that cert, and then we'll just keep moving through it, and we'll provide some insight on you know, how you can get multiple certs, shave off some time. There's like some reciprocal programs, things like that. So I think we'll just go step by step. What we know about getting some of these certs, I think we have a handful of these between the three of us. And yeah, like I said, who should have these, and you know, more importantly, what you need to certify things as we get closer to the ABSA certs and things like that. There is certain certification you actually have to sign certain documents and certification numbers and whatnot. So I think this will be a good one. I think people will be interested in this. You know, people looking to get into it, people looking to progress to different things. I think this will be a good interest piece for sure, this one.
Just to add some comment to that, for me, the world of certifications is a minefield. And it's actually pretty interesting how all these different fields and how we would have grouped these together here in this episode all overlap. And actually, you need to know a lot about everybody else's job in order to do your own. That kind of fascinates me.
Yeah, very good point. And this is by no means an all-inclusive list or topic. I mean, you can go on forever about these, but yeah, these are kind of the things that we overlap. And yeah, great point. You got to know what certs people should have. Like, and use it for an example, right? You want to make sure those guys are certified properly. Just for something that we're looking at, even the visual inspectors, you know, it all overlaps and all kind of feeds off each other.
It definitely does. So I guess we'll kick it off. Actually, I think maybe one good thing to get into would be maybe kind of how we did actually get into in-service inspection. What do you think? Is that going to be too drawn out, or you think we can do it in a couple minutes?
That's not too bad. Maybe let's do a quick round table each about you know, how we ended up here, and you know, if that was a good idea or not.
I think it's
provide some insight on people what not to do, those type of things.
Yeah. I guess since it was my idea, I'll kick it off. I got into the trades, journeyman red seal pipe fitter. I went in, I got my CWB level 1, which is a Canadian Welding Bureau. And your level 1 essentially, well, maybe we'll get into that a little bit, but I went and got my level 1 welding inspector certification, and kind of leaked into the in-service side once I kind of became aware of its existence, because as a tradesperson, I really wasn't aware of it. Like you kind of, I don't want to say idolized, but like you looked up to somebody who had like a CWB level 2 or 3 certification, which are no joke to get, but you weren't quite aware of the in-service side of it at the time, especially when you're doing like fabrication and on-site installation on green sites, I guess, so to speak. So
yeah, you're a little removed from it, I guess, being at the trade level of things, right? There's a couple buffers in between, if you will. So
yeah. So that's essentially how I got in, and I think I've said essentially twice already this episode, so I'll try just to cut that out.
Oh, no, that stays.
Scott, how'd you get in?
Very similar to yourself. I started in the trade, started as a welder, went through that, moved into pipe fitting, went through that, and I'm kind of a restless mind type of person where I'm always looking to, keep my interests going. I guess is one way to put it. So yeah, similar to Frank, I moved on to the CWB. That was kind of the next step, unless you're going to go the foreman GF and follow that career path. But moving away from that, you kind of, CWB is one of the first things you can jump into relatively easily, and we'll talk to that when we get into the actual cert details. And then same thing, along with that, I kind of delved into the NDE world as well, got some of those certs, kind of did a dual role, and then, moved into the in-service when I kind of found out more about that and how that worked, got some API certs, started along that road, and then, jump back and forth a little bit. So yeah, very, very similar to Frank. That's kind of how I found myself in this position.
Matt?
Well, I'm not similar to you two. So originally I went to SAIT and studied gas process operations. So I was interested in the process and the operating and how we made products from raw products. So that's where I started for 2 years. And that landed me a job with a service company to the oil and gas industry, which happened to be an inspection company. And then from there, I started doing corrosion surveys, which led me to getting a UT ticket. And then from there, I learned about, I met Frank, I guess, and I learned about the in-service inspection world, and that led me through to where I am today. So I've taken a couple of API exams, did the CWB thing more out of curiosity, I guess. Certainly not my strongest point. But that's how I found my way.
You actually do hold your instrumentation ticket, though, don't you?
I also have an industrial instrumentation ticket for what it's worth, yeah.
Well, that's no joke, though. Like, that one's a pretty hard one to get, dude.
It is hard, for sure, but in all honesty, it's one of those, like I say, it's a minefield. So you kind of think, what's the next best career path, career move to make, where things are heading. So I went and did it, never used it.
No expiry, though, right?
No expiry, no. I mean, I guess if COVID takes that much of a hold, I need to go on the tools I can, but...
There you go. Hey,
yeah.
There's valves always messing up that you could go service.
There are valves always messing up.
Yeah, you know that more than well, I guess we all know that. So,
but yeah, so it's been a interesting path for sure.
So I guess since it's at the top of the list, we'll start with CWB, Canadian Welding Bureau, or for our American friends, AWS would kind of be the equivalent. What do you guys? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no real particular order here. This is just how we wrote things down. It's not really meant to be a progression thing, even though it's somewhat how we progress through our careers. Not that one's better than the other or anything like that, right? But let's start off with the welding inspector. Typically, that's going to be like your quality control people working in the fab shops, new construction.
Mm-hmm.
For your turnaround guys, it'll be the repair companies doing the work, their QC people. They're going to be their CWB1, level 2, those type of people. Essentially how those work is there's actually not a lot of requirements. You can get into that one relatively easy. If you have zero experience, you can just take I believe it's a 2-week course, get your level 1, which doesn't allow you to do anything other than essentially learn under somebody. That's the intent anyways.
Yep.
If you do have some experience like a trade background or you took a technical certificate, one of those, you can jump right into the level 2 or the level 1 just by writing the exam. So there's a couple ways into that, but that would be your easiest route just to start down this path without knowing any better. You could jump right into that level 1, and then they do go up to a level 3. That's more of the certifying procedures, if you will. So that'd be kind of where that gets pulled in. I don't think a lot of people move right up to that level, but I guess it all depends on where your interest is and where your career takes you. And then Frank mentioned like the AWS, they got some equivalents where the associate certified welding inspector be equivalent to level 2. And then they got a senior, which would be like the level 2 equivalent. And then the CSWIP is like the European version. So the same thing. It's laid out much the same, 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. It kind of mirrors the level 1, 2, and 3 program. And there's some reciprocal programs how you can bounce back and forth between those certs. Maybe we'll we'll touch on that a little bit too before we move out of this one.
Yeah, and the CWB like level 2 is typically where a lot of welders and pipe fitters who want to move into quality control actually find themselves, and more specifically shop orientated guys or gals or whoever's working in there. It's what they know. They know the fabrication process really well. They know the quality control steps, and you kind of want to get off the tools and kind of progress towards, I don't want to quite say a management position, but you want to progress with your career and maybe find something like that next challenge. Maybe something else to kind of note on the level 1s and 2s is that you can actually get endorsed to different codes within those. So I think most of us we're level 2 CWB inspectors, and then you can get endorsements to section 8, B31.3, B31.1. There's a lot of different structural ones in there that you can kind of, I don't want to say specialize in, but you get endorsed underneath that. And obviously you can accumulate as many endorsements as they have to kind of expand your knowledge base and possibly your employability. But there's a lot of different things, and there are different knowledge tests on those. So to make sure, I guess, we'll use this word as face value, competent in performing those tasks, right? But maybe one key thing to kind of note, it is our general opinion that getting any of these certifications just means you have the baseline knowledge to receive the certification. And my personal belief is you actually start learning once you get that endorsement, and kind of become familiar with the actual stuff once you start getting exposed to it in the field if you don't have any experience yet.
Yeah, exactly. And the programs that have the levels like the 1, 2, and 3, that is the whole intention. It's almost like an apprenticeship, if you will. The level 1, you don't know anything other than the exam you just wrote, and you're looking to learn for a couple of years. So how you'd get that level 2 is, what is it, like 2 years experience, I believe, or a couple of years. Then you can go write another exam. That was a good point on the code endorsements. And back in the day, they never used to carry over when you moved up levels. So you get a clean slate every time you moved up to a 2 or a 3. Now they carry with you. So just a piece of advice, if you want to collect all those code endorsements and you're looking to learn at the level 1 stage, just go knock them all off if you like doing exams and like learning about construction codes, because then when you bump up to your level 2, they all come with you. So it's a nice little change they made. I'm not sure how many years ago, but
yeah, it's a good kind of idea to kind of see, the ASME codes are fairly consistent, I guess would be good. But, you want to jump into structural codes and stuff. Actually, some of the oddball stuff that we kind of saw in turnaround, like they might be asking the in-service guys to go look at some structural welding and stuff like that. And if you don't have any knowledge base in it, you're kind of like, well, what the heck am I doing here? Like, but
yeah, exactly.
It's steel, it's metal, and they got to weld on it, and it's the same properties are going to happen. You just need to be aware of the code requirements for the work that's being performed. So just keep that in mind, and learning about structural may not be a bad idea at all.
No, that certainly comes up a lot, that one.
Yeah.
And being an inspector, I've been asked about concrete and foundations, tanks, almost anything.
Yeah. So
yeah, a lot of different avenues, and maybe a good way to see what piques your interest too, right? If you're, it's especially nowadays, it's kind of hard to get a job as the level 1 type of person, not as big a demand as there used to be. So I mean, that's something you can see what you want to venture down. Maybe piping's not your thing and vessels is, or maybe you like tanks better, maybe you like the structural better. Dip into those code books a little bit, at least give you a bit of an idea what you might be in for. So
yeah, no, good point. C-SWIP, that one, actually, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I'm not. Like, I just kind of, like, it's the European one, and I wasn't too familiar with it. And all of a sudden, talking to my quote-unquote peers, like, on the job site, like, some people have it, some people don't. Some people were planning to go write it, and I was like, well, I wonder if this is something that should be on my radar. It's pretty interesting, though.
Yeah, I guess it depends what you want to do. If you're going to work in Canada your whole life, it is probably a useless thing to get. But if you're looking for a little more international, especially European work, that would I know I don't really know because I haven't went down this road yet or tried to, but I mean that might be something you want to look at. And they do have a reciprocal program. So how CSWIPS works is if you have your CWB2, you can apply for their 3.1, which is their somewhat equivalent version. They'll make you write their exam, and I think they make you do a course or a shorter version of the course, and pay a donation obviously too. And then on the same topic for AWS, they've got the certified welding inspector would be like the equivalent to the level 2. And if you're into the level 3 and those higher ones, same thing. They got the senior and the level 3 that kind of cross over. So if you're looking for that one to go work in the U.S. in the new construction industry, their program is a little more lax, or at least it was. It would just complied of CWB. You'd send them a copy of it, a nice donation, and I think a resume or something to that effect, and then they would send you the certification, and then off you go. You can go work down there if you can find a job.
Yeah, I think, similar to apprenticeships like Scott alluded to, it's all about hours, experience hours. And, not to get too philosophical, but like, just like anything in life, like the more hours you put towards a specific type of skill, the more competent you're actually going to become in it. And you would progress. And with these certifications, you would progress to the next level and, go from there. Sometimes the more information you gain in a specific topic might intrigue or pique your interest into pursuing it a little bit further, because it might expose something that you weren't aware, or an aspect of it that you weren't aware of, that what might lead you to even go into something else as well. Maybe like a CSWIP where you might have the opportunity to go work overseas and in Europe or wherever else would recognize these certifications and use them, and getting a chance to, I don't want to say go on vacation, but go somewhere you wouldn't normally go and get paid to do it might be a perk for somebody.
Sure, yeah.
So, next one, do we need to cover anything else on these ones, you think?
I think we did a good job. Maybe just the kind of the boundaries of it. So like CWB, that's only recognized Canada-wide. Nobody else is going to know what that is or care what it is. AWS, for the most part, it's an American recognized certification. Then CSWIP is the European one. So those are kind of the boxes those ones fit into. So if you're looking to travel around with your CWB, it might not be much good to you. But yeah, that's kind of where those fit in. They're like a country recognized thing. They're not so much international like the APIs and some things are once we get to those.
Yeah, no, definitely. Matt, anything on these ones?
No, I think it's just maybe worth adding to the audience that a lot of those exams are all modular based, right?
Yeah.
So you can do them over, I think, a year. Maybe the time limit you get to write them.
That's a good point.
15 modules or whatever. So you can chop away at these things. And yeah, there's money and cost involved for sure, but you don't have to lay out thousands of dollars up front and knock these things out in 3 weeks. So.
Yeah, my level 1 and 2, I just ordered the modules, and you would have to go into CWB headquarters or I guess a testing facility, and you can knock out each, final boss kind of test for each module and pass it and move on to the next one. You can actually just do a self-study and go knock it out at one time, but your final exam gets exponentially bigger. Yeah. And writing exams are already stressful enough for me. Like I lock up on them and I absolutely hate them, except for the API exams. I actually enjoy, I think they're well-written ones, but getting back to these CWB ones, like my personal opinion would be get the modules, even go do a course. You can do them at CWB, you can do them at NATE or SATE, which are the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology and the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. And I'm sure, depending on where you're listening to this, there may be some local, education centers or university or colleges that may offer courses where you can go take these. Even I did mine on nights, actually. Yeah. So just something to keep in mind. And, like Matt said, you can kind of learn at your own pace and get them done over a year, as opposed to, 3 or 4 weeks on a night course or a day course or something like that.
That's right. And I think just to wrap up that little segment, the beauty of those courses for sure is you can work and learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little different than some of the other ones we'll get to, where it's just an exam, one-time deal, where these are, more of a work at your own pace type of thing. And then, like Frank mentioned, once you get that level 1, that's your opportunity to start learning. You essentially don't know anything at that point. That's where the learning really begins.
Yeah, you become aware there's a code of construction that you're supposed to,
right.
to follow.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, especially the tradespeople making the transition. You learn a lot about, like, oh wow, I wasn't supposed to be doing that, or I'm allowed to do this, and bit of an eye opener, I guess, depending on where your background is.
Yeah, it was actually, that's an extremely good point, because I remember learning about stuff during my level 1 courses and being like, that is why we do that. Mm-hmm. And then going into the API courses, like, oh wow, that is why, like, that's a rule. And maybe I shouldn't have been doing that when we were, you pick up bad habits from fabricating sometimes, just from your mentors, or however, bad company practices that don't have proper guidance from people who actually understand code and stuff like that. And could get you in trouble, it could not, but I guess the whole point of this is to learn and progress and kind of move on.
Yeah, it's almost something that should be part of the trade apprenticeship. Is maybe more specifically for welding in general, like your first year should have a CWB level 1 course thrown in there too, right? It might help, might not, but it's definitely an overlap of knowledge. It's not really there.
Yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. Next one we got written down here is non-destructive examination, or NDE techs, right? We kind of briefly touched before on the CGSB certifications, and those again come in 3 different levels, 1, 2, and 3, and our ASNT levels 1, 2, and 3, which is the US equivalent of the CGSB, and ASNT is actually mentioned in the ASME codes, the SNT TC1A. Yeah. So, that the SNT one is a Canadian-US thing, and you can get certified to it here. So, who wants to kick off this one? I feel like I'm guiding these last 2 ones. Just kind of pushing.
Well, you're doing such a good job of it.
Oh man, I want to go to bed. Switching over from night shift in like a day has been killing me.
You should be one to stay up now.
Oh man.
I guess some of the quick takeaways with this, like the CGSB is the Canadian recognized one, ASNT is the American one. Yeah, level 1, 2, and 3. So a lot of the level 1s have kind of been omitted, if you will, especially for the surface ones. They're somewhat useless now. So kind of how they work, they're like an apprenticeship. The level 1, you really don't know a lot yet. You're just kind of learning. You have to have a level 2 certifying you at all times. Once you get to that level 2, you can make calls. So you can accept or reject things on a report. And then the level 3, again, that kind of goes to the approving procedures. That's where that comes into play. So a lot of people will get to that level 2 level and have a career just at that, right? Depending on what you're going for. NRCan is the certifying body that we have here in Canada. CGSB writes all the standards. So that's kind of how that works if you're looking for information. And again, it's got to have so many months of experience. You got to take a week or 2 long course. So it is very much like a trade style apprenticeship, just a little more condensed, if you will. ASNT, from what I've read up on it, is very much similar thing. That's just the US governed equivalent, if you will. And then like Frank alluded to, the S&T TC1A. So where that one comes in, all the ASME codes like this one for whatever reason, and it is an in-house certified program. So your bigger NDE companies, without mentioning names, everybody knows who they are. They'll all have these programs. Most of their steady techs will be certified to both CGSB and S&T TC1A. So where that one gets important is into the new construction. So if you're certifying stuff to ASME, you got to have that one. So that's where you got to watch out for. For us turnaround guys, it's not really too relevant for the most part, because we work under B51 and they recognize the CGSB. So that's kind of the differences, if you will, or where we split that up. So for that new construction, that TC1A is the one you want to be looking for. And then just because we're in Canada and we like to make things a little more difficult, the CGSB, you're going to want to have that as well too.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, like the way I kind of look at it between the CGSB and the SNT, you get CGSB ticket, which is kind of universal for a method. or a technique, and then the SNT is you taking a test or training or a competency check to a company's actual procedures you're going to be using in which to examine a particular item.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
so if you join an NDE company, they have their procedures and standards how to do things. Well, you need to be trained up and show demonstration that you know how they go about doing things.
Yeah, almost like a job qualifier type of thing, right?
Yeah, so I think for me, even if SNT is geared towards the SME, the new construction portion, I think for me, being in service, I want to see both.
Sure, yeah. There's nothing wrong with more, right? And I think for most of those companies that have their SNT programs, they're not going to hire a guy off the street and give him that. They're going to hire a CJSB qualified guy or get him that first.
That's right.
I think that's usually a bit of a minimum requirement, but they have before they'll let you go through their SNT program, or at least it should be, right? Otherwise, it's you can't really trust that program too much, right? You want to have the guy certified first, and then that's a little extra, a little icing on top, if you will, type of thing.
Yeah, and working for the owner user, I mean, I get the advantage point that we get to audit these companies, these NDE companies, their SNT programs. And actually, some of them do a pretty fine job, right? Some of them go investing in classrooms, they're building equipment, or they're getting sample equipment, and they're putting their technicians and their examiners really through their paces.
That the SNT actually, I know of a few owner users that actually have that program, and their in-house inspectors, such as you, Matt, would actually hold an SNT TC certification, so you could go out and perform that kind of testing without them having to bring in a third-party contractor to do it.
Yeah, there'd certainly be some efficiency and cost saving there for sure. Ourselves, we don't at this point, but
yeah, well, usually they end up getting a contractor anyway because of workload, but they at least, at the very minimum, it gives their in-house inspectors some baseline knowledge on what exactly they may be auditing during a turnaround situation, or even a repair situation, or even just a on-the-run situation where they're looking at stuff, and kind of open their eyes and expose them to what they should be looking for and how things should correctly be conducted.
No, absolutely. And that's a really good point, actually, mate, Frank, because it's somewhat ironic that, the API inspector has to accept the report or the results of the NDE technician.
Yeah.
So you do need to have some knowledge and be versed in, the methods that you've chosen to use to either detect or find something, and how they came about either seeing it or not seeing it, and the limitations of such. So that's always been a pretty interesting point to me, that the API inspector shall accept the report.
Yeah. So you should definitely have some knowledge of that NDE tech that's doing the work for you. I think one point with kind of the crossing the lines a little bit, so you can, like, an owner user can do their own NDE for things like, say you're just doing wet fluorescent on all the seams, that type of in-service inspection, without necessarily a program in place. Now, where it gets a little more stringent is, say you have repairs or you have construction work happening or repair work happening, that's where you definitely got to have a program. You have to be CJSB qualified, S&T in some instances. So that's kind of where that can get crossed over a little bit, and it shouldn't. Another thing to note with that too, your repair contractor also has to accept you as a NDE company and accept your procedures. So if you're doing that as an owner user, just checking out all your long and circ seams for yourself, that's fine. But once you get into repairs and your repair company needs NDE done to certify the work, you can no longer do that unless you have a program and the certification in place. So that's where your NDE company would, in some instances, be hauled in for that type of stuff. So there is a bit of a line crossing there, just to be aware of. The owner user, you can kind of do what you want to some degree, but once you get to that repair construction stage, you can no longer just do what you want. You got to definitely be properly certified.
Good grenade catch. I guess from here we're going to move on to our favorite. The whole kind of reason we started this podcast is our in-service inspection certifications, I guess. Of course, there's the run-of-the-mill, I guess, air quotes there, API 510, 570, and 653. Also, the pipeline one, which is relatively new, the 1169 certifications. And then you get your supplemental ones in there, your 571, your 577, your 580, your 936.
936.
Oh,
Yeah.
frack, yeah.
Yeah. Your what are the other ones? Sorry, I can't. Matt's hand is in the way there.
Well, SIFE and SIRE.
Yeah.
So now that we've rattled off a bunch of numbers and acronyms,
We're done.
All done.
Yeah.
Good night. So what are these things, right?
Yeah.
Maybe should we go back to the core ones?
Maybe we should start off explaining who API are.
Yeah. What are these guys? They're an acronym too. So yeah, I guess I'm talking. I'll just keep going. So American Petroleum Institute. So they're the governing body, if you will, for all these certifications and the exams you have to take through them. So the 510, let's start with that. We got them lowest numbers to highest. So 510s are pressure vessel inspectors. So if you're looking to get into that, if that's what you're interested in, that's the one you'd go after. 570s for piping. 653 is tanks. And then one relatively newer one, 1169, which is kind of making its way into most companies' standards now, that they want to see that for pipelines. So those pipeline guys that have been, have all the experience, but maybe not necessarily a certification to go with it. This is kind of been made for them, if you will. It's not really our wheelhouse, but it is somewhat related. So we just thought we'd drag that in as one of the core ones, right? That's kind of you're going to go down one or all of these avenues essentially to start with, I would say, and then maybe we'll get into these supplementary ones.
Yeah, actually, maybe a quick jump back is you can the Canadian pipeline one for fabrication is Z662, which you can also be endorsed with your level 1 or 2 there. So just something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, with the CWB, right?
Yeah.
So that'd be back to if you're going to be a fabrication guy or quality control, that would be where that kind of comes into play. And I believe when you do your 1169, you can choose to do the CSA version or the API version. You can follow one track or the other, but it gets you the same endorsement. So I guess it depends where your knowledge lies.
Yeah, I think I have heard that before too.
Yeah, I might be making this up, but yeah, I think that's how that one goes. You can go one or the other.
Well, we make most of this podcast up anyway.
That's
so,
right.
Yeah.
Why stop now?
So yeah, and then so did you want to keep going with the supplemental ones?
Well,
or?
maybe before we jump into that, how do you get these certs? What's all involved? Maybe we'll speak to that a little bit before we jump into the supplemental.
Yeah, we kind of been plowing through these, but yeah, okay.
What are you? Oh, you're looking at me. Okay. So it's somewhat of an apprenticeship, if you will, too. What they're looking for here is, first of all, it depends on your education. If you have none, you're going to need a lot more experience. If you have a lot, like an engineer or something, you're going to need a little bit less experience. So the first thing they want to see is, what do you have for education? Next thing, you're going to have so many years of experience in, now this can be a number of things, right? It doesn't have to be inspection, but they're going to want, about a year of inspection or supervision of those kind of activities. But I mean, you can be in the repair stage, you can be working with the trades, you can be in operations. There's a number of different avenues that are kind of related that they'll accept. Then you once you have all that experience and the education they've laid out, you apply for those, make a donation, of course, and then they'll let you attempt this exam. This one's been changed a lot over the years. It used to be like an 8-hour ordeal. You had to bring all these code books with you. It was a whole paper exam. There'd be 10,000 inspectors jammed into a ballroom. It was quite a thing. Now it's all went to online. They provide all the code books. Whether that's good or bad, I guess that's just the way it's going. And there's a lot more facilities, so I think you can get in to write these exams a lot more frequently than you could. It used to be like essentially once a year or twice a year for whatever cert you're going for. Say you want your 510, well, there's only like 2 dates in a year you can write that, and it may be during turnaround season or something. That's just the way it is. Now I think it's a little more flexible, so I mean, I guess it's better that way, but that's kind of how you would look at going after one of those or all of those.
That's right, Scott. So right now, the API group, they proctor the exams through Prometric. Well, they certainly do here in Canada. Mm-hmm. And yeah, now you get 2 weeks. Well, I think they've actually extended it to 3 weeks now because of the whole COVID thing. But yeah, you get a 2-week testing window. And so once you received your notice to say that you can go challenge an exam, then you contact Prometric and you can just book yourself a time and a place. And yeah, along you go and take your exam. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. A little more flexible, and it's not like we should say there's a lot of companies out there that provide exam prep courses, but it's not a requirement like it is for NDE, for example, where that's part of the cert. Is you got to have the hours, you got to have the training, and then you can write it. for API, unless they've changed it recently, you don't have to take a course to write the exam. It's just something that may or may not be to your benefit. And there's a lot of companies that offer those, do a good job of them as well.
Yeah, but you touched on one thing there. I really am a fan of actually doing it paper, just crack it open. Yeah, they know we drink beer during the whole thing.
Could be a buble, sparkling water.
Scott will start singing here right away. I am actually a big fan. I like the paper test a lot better. It seems like they kind of hinder you. There is some restrictions on opening PDF documents and searchable PDF documents and stuff like that. When I was doing my 510 and 570, we actually got to write notes in the codes that you would bring to the exam.
It was pretty astonishing what you could write in a book.
Yeah, no, it
Right.
was
And tabs
good.
and stuff too,
Yeah,
right?
and we got to tab it.
Yeah, huge benefit.
Right. And that's no different than a bookmark. Like they do give you bookmarked PDFs, but they're only bookmarked at the, I guess, for the chapters. Right. Actually, they might have the sections too. Maybe I can't.
I think it's well bookmarked. I mean, the other thing I was going to say was you were able to strip down the SME Section 8 book from 1,100 pages to 250. Because that's really all you needed.
That's where all the answers are, yeah.
Yeah, and they would teach you that in the course. And, you know, that's something else we might be able to touch on a little bit once we get through this is actual course stuff. But, you know, trying to do these tests on a computer can actually add some challenge to it. And don't let that kind of hinder you or freak you out about it. But, you know, make sure you have a paper copy too. Like I like reading and studying out of a paper copy instead of sitting there looking at a screen for hours on end, because that's all we do all day anyway, and it just fatigues your eyes and just drains you.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think you got to be conscious of the fact how the exam's delivered. So don't, you know, for some of the maybe the older guys in the industry and that, they may be a little more shy of the computers, but you got to get familiar with PDFs, bookmarks, the search tools, because the books, they aren't stripped down. So Section 8, when you go to your exam, is 1,200 pages. So in order to find information, and for me, that's probably one of the keys for these exams, a lot of them, certainly with API, you just got to know where to go, how to navigate the material.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big idea of the exam is that you know how to navigate it. Obviously, nobody can remember all this stuff, or you shouldn't. Something wrong with you if you can remember these things. But that's really the test, right? Is you know where to look, and that's why there's a time limit. If there was, and it's a long time limit, don't get me wrong, but if there was no time limit, anybody could pass this exam, because all you got to do is turn enough pages, you're going to find what you're looking for. But it's just knowing how to navigate it in a timely manner, right? Because when you're on a job, maybe not so much for new construction and design phase, you have some more time, but like turnarounds that we're familiar with, you got to find these answers relatively quickly, right? And that's all part of the job.
Yeah, it definitely is. Moving on to our API supplementals, you think we're good to do that?
Yeah, I think so. Let's go with these, and then let's maybe wrap it up as far as which ones are relevant, which ones you need to actually do something, which ones are good info. But yeah, let's go through the supplementals first.
So I guess kind of the main supplemental ones that you would commonly come across is 571, which is damage mechanisms affecting the refining industry. And this one is a pretty good one. It's going to actually kind of outline damage mechanisms and corrosion mechanisms that we're going to come into contact with during the API 510 or 570 or 653, even the 1169 inspections. The main 510, 570, 653 exams actually do encompass portions of like 571 in there, and there is some test questions on there. They want you to know some basic damage mechanisms like CUI, which is corrosion under insulation. The next one would be 577, which is metallurgy, weld inspection and metallurgy. That's a API recommended practice. I think what's the 582? I think is the other one, and that kind of touches on the stainless steel welding API. It's 582 or 583. Off the top of my head, I can't remember right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Then we have 580, which is risk-based inspection. And that one kind of, if you listen to the last episode there about turnaround, we were talking about RBI. That's exactly what we were talking about. So that helps you establish inspection intervals and a risk versus consequence of extending or shortening those intervals out based on your inspection findings. These next two, kind of new to me, SIFE and SIRE. So from what the two boys here explained to me, SIFE is shop inspection, I guess, new inspection.
Source inspector.
Source inspector, yeah. No, I don't mean the S stands for shop, but like it's source as in you're in the shop, or shop as like new fabrication.
Right, yeah.
You've always done so well with your acronyms today.
Most of them these ones are brand new to me. So
pretty off. Yeah, so if the source inspector, if that's a familiar or unfamiliar term to anyone listening, that's essentially like the shop inspection stuff. That's just what that's referred to. So I guess you're not totally off there by saying shop inspector, but yeah, it's what it stands for is source inspector. And then, so the SIFE is for fixed equipment. So that'd be like your pressure vessels and those type of things. And then the rotating equipment. So that'd be like compressors, pumps, those types of things. From what I understand, or from what I've experienced, nobody's looking for this one too hard yet, at least in our geography of, Alberta and Canada wide. But where I can see this going is kind of the way the 1169 did, is where they kind of pulled in something that didn't really exist and put a certification together for an industry that was there. So it's something I could see maybe over the years clients looking for. So if they want to contract out a guy to do some shop inspections, they're going to want him to have one of these two certifications, depending on what the shop's building. And it's not a bad idea. That's just kind of my take on it. So I don't know if it's something you'd want to go after too badly right now, but it might be something you want to put on your radar. What are your thoughts on that one, Matt?
No, I agree. I think it's one that will be coming probably up here in the next few years. Things are generally going towards certifications and showing competency in something. I've heard that both these source inspector certifications cover a whole array of codes, i.e. from ASME, new construction codes. You cover all the NDE techniques in, trying to uncover any defects and prove the equipment's good. And it also captures a lot of the API in service stuff too. So from my perspective, it'd be a good one to challenge for sure, because it, kind of brush up on a whole spectrum of different skills and knowledges. But yeah, I think in today, maybe not quite as worthwhile as the previous ones in the core API. Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it, I think. And it probably should be a wide range for the exam, because you might be running into a lot of different things, a lot of different construction codes. So I guess you want to have a good base knowledge, if that's the idea of this one, is that you can go and do a wide range of source inspections. And then just kind of all these supplemental ones, as a general statement, they're all, if nothing else, great resources. So if you want to learn more in more of the specific avenues, so you're not going to be on too many jobs where they're going to want your 571 cert number to put on a report, for example, but it is a great avenue for just additional resource. And then it just shows that you're somewhat of a specialist in that field, I guess, is one way to look at it. So say you're really interested in pressure vessel inspection and you really like the damage mechanism. So those would be two things that might go together well, the 510, 571. And it just really kind of speaks to your experience, I guess, if you're looking to fine tune it.
Yeah, I think for me, the supplementary ones really go hand in hand for the owner user inspector.
Right.
So like I said before, I studied gas process operations, which got me really interested in the refinery setting. Then I found myself in in-service inspection. So I went into the 510. And then doing this supplementary on the 571s, and then I went into the 580, it really rounds it all together. So you begin to understand how operations take part, process engineering, what's our input into that, and the maintenance, and really understanding the process and how that affects equipment. For me, I'm a big fan of trying to predict and trying to guess, if you will, or if we open equipment or look at a tower, this is what you can expect or anticipate to be coming across.
Yeah, right. And you kind of have that perspective of you have a lot more interest or ownership, right? Being an employee of the one facility, right? And you kind of take ownership of all that. So that kind of plays to how all these would work out for you. As far as, say, when you contract in guys like me and Frank, you're looking for that 510 certification type of thing, right? So I guess the point to take here for anyone looking to get into this, any of those core ones, that'd be the first thing you'd want to jump after right away. 510, 570, 510, 653, let's say. Those would be kind of the two core ones, whatever avenue you want to go there. 570 is somewhat of a supplemental as well, I would say.
No.
It is its own thing, but I don't know. Piping is such a niche thing. It kind of tags along with the 510, I find a lot with guys' experiences. So those would be something you want to grab right away, and then wherever you find yourself, especially if you find yourself in a routine role at one facility, that's where you might want to start digging into some of these supplemental ones, 571, those type of things.
I think just from my own experience, coming from the pipe fitting side, the 570 was a natural progression, but also it's a good introduction to how the API exams are structured, and it's not a calculation heavy code like your 653 would be, or even your 510, and it gives you a good kind of baseline feel of what you're going to expect to kind of, what kind of questions and what kind of things you're kind of expected to know coming out of that. Because once you jump into 510, you have like nozzle reinforcement calculations, MDMT calculations. It progresses quite significantly, even though vessels are definitely more complex than piping. Piping is 90% of your facility, and knowing how to properly inspect it or have the baseline knowledge and guidance on how to inspect it and which codes to go reference and stuff like that, I think is for me, the first one I always recommend to people to go and get, because it's not as scary. Like, people aren't as intimidated by piping as opposed to like a vessel, because most of the time when we're working on vessels, it's like a vac column or something, or it could be just a simple little drum or a little suction bottle off a compressor. But most of the time people treat those as piping as well. It's just a chamber with nozzles, right? So
yeah, and it kind of depends on where your experience lies too. Like,
yes.
if you've been doing a lot of piping stuff, you might not want to jump into the 510 right away, because you're going to find yourself getting a job using that certificate and you don't really know anything about it. Where I was going with that comment about the 570 is, on an employment standpoint, 510 guys typically are allowed to do piping, not the other way around. 570 guys is never going to be able to go into a vessel and do that. So it kind of depends on where you're at with your career, what you're looking for. If you're looking to, get right into it, 510 is a really sought after one. But at the same time, it all depends where your experience is. Don't jump into that one too early, right? You can find yourself in trouble as well.
That's a very valid point, Scott. And I warned you before we started the episode, I'm tired and grouchy. So that's a good perspective that I didn't really think about at the time, but you're right. If you do have your 510, you most likely will have the ability to go out and look at piping. Whereas if you have your 570, they're not going to throw you in a Coke drum or something and say, have at her, right? You're going to be on the sidelines watching the rope guys do it.
Yeah, exactly. It was more of an employment standpoint. Nothing against the 570. It's a valid certification and it has its place for sure. But that was more of an employment standpoint, especially if you're a contract guy bouncing around. There's not too much want for the straight up 570 guy. They're usually looking to staff up 510, and a lot of guys have both, right? 510, 570. Those guys are walking around with both of those in their pockets. So.
Yeah. Well, I was going to make the comment there, and you brought it in there, Scott. The 510, 570 exams are very similar. The content is very similar. Yeah, there's a little more math in one than the other. But for me personally, a tip would be, if you go and challenge either of those, do the next one 4 months later.
Yeah, have them both. Yeah.
Don't wait 2 years. You'll see immediately when you go to challenge the next exam, you'll be like, wow, this is very much like the last one I did.
Yeah, especially if you start with the 570, you get that 510 right away, and then you can still actually get a job out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the way the codes are written, the intent of them, the scope of them, the repairs are pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Damage mechanisms are the same.
Yeah, same book they reference, right?
That's right. So yeah, no, hit both up.
Yeah, no, definitely. What do we got next on the board there? National board?
Yeah, so I guess before we jump out of it, we did allude to it earlier, but the APIs are a pretty internationally recognized certification, so it's not something that's just stuck to the US or anything like that. We use them up here in Canada for in-service inspections, obviously in the US, and then pretty well all around the world. They're pretty well recognized, so if that's just something to consider too, if you're looking at traveling around, if that's your thing too, that's a good one to go after for that too, right?
That's a good point for sure. Scott, I think National Board is right up your alley, seeing as you're the only commissioned inspector amongst us here. That might help your employment with the podcast.
Well, it won't in Alberta because it's it's entirely useless here unless you work for our regulator. But yeah, let's burn through that one and explain kind of how it works and how it's applied and how it's not. Yeah, like I said, it's not recognized in Alberta, and what I mean by that is you can't. So how it works, there's a commissioned inspector, there's authorized inspector, and then they have an individual one. I forget what they call it now. It's kind of a placeholder. So the commissioned inspector, how that works, you have to actually work for an authorized inspection agency, and in Alberta, ABSA is essentially that because they have their AB documents and we fill out the AB 40s and those forms, and that's kind of how our process is. We don't follow the National Board process for repairs. Now, new construction is a little different thing. I don't know if we'll touch on that too much, but so where that really is beneficial in Alberta is will be the next ones we're moving into, and they want you to have challenged the exam or have the certification. Then you can get different endorsements through ABSA. So we'll get to that one when we move down to that. But yeah, essentially how the commissioned inspector works, it's a two-part. You have the certification, you work for an authorized inspection agency. So, in the United States, they use this. They have, certain companies that are authorized inspection agencies, or there's a bunch of insurance companies, same thing. So you would be essentially like the regulator is in Alberta. It kind of works like that. So you would be certifying repairs, things like that. And they also have the authorized inspector endorsement. So again, how that one works is it's an endorsement you get. They call it the A endorsement. So that's kind of hinges around the new construction, but some other things as well. And for that one, you have to actually work for National Board or one of the deemed authorities, if you will. And in Alberta, that's ABSA. So unless you work for them, you can't really use this. This is a certification you can go get, but it's just going to expire on you and you won't really have much use unless you go ahead and get a job with the regulators. So they're kind of the olive branch of the National Board, at least in Alberta. So that's kind of how that works. And then they have this individual one now. And really my take on that is it's a placeholder. So if you go and write the exam and go through all that and you're not working for an authorized agency, or you were and then you work for somebody else now, you can drop it down to this one. And you can't really do a lot with it. You can't certify National Board repairs, anything like that. But if you move on and work for authorized agency or something like that, and you want to re-up your commission or become an authorized inspector, then you can bump it back up to that. So I think that was kind of their intent of this relatively new one. What are your guys' thoughts around the National Board? What's your take on that?
You did a great job.
I concur.
Well then, moving right along.
I think, I went and wrote the National Board examination for just the shop inspector. Obviously, like Scott said, it's useless to us here. It will tie into our regulator certifications, which not ironically is next on the list of things to talk about. So, it was pretty good. It was something that I was kind of interested in, and it's kind of it's a different code, different perspective a little bit, but most of the stuff is the same. I find that it's a little more geared towards like boilers and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I was gonna jump in with that if you didn't go there. That is one of the few ones that drags you into the boilers. Yeah. API doesn't really have anything like that. I don't think CWB has a Section 1 endorsement you can get. So the boilers, which, our regulator holds close to their heart and, for good reason, right? At one time there was a lot of disasters and fatalities because of boilers, but it's kind of the one endorsement that pulls your knowledge specifically to boilers and ASME Section 1. So I think that's why they want you to have that endorsement before they'll let you certify boilers, which we'll get to right away. And then just another thing with that, there is a couple endorsements. So the A endorsement I mentioned quickly, so that would be like your authorized inspector. So for doing new construction, so say you're building a pressure vessel anywhere, but in Alberta, ABSA would come in. They would be the national board representative, if you want to look at it that way. They would stamp it for you. They would have their A endorsement. If it's built out of country, say the U.S. for example, it would be certified by an authorized inspector that worked for the national board or one of those agencies. They would stamp and certify it. They would be A endorsed. ABSA recognizes that, so we bring that into country relatively easily. That's kind of how that works. If you're going to be a commissioned inspector, there's the IS, so like the in-service. So that's doing inspections and that type of thing. And then they do have an R endorsement. So if you're doing repairs, the National Board program, they use, a different form, but it's very similar to our AB40s here. I think it's called the R1. They like their repair nameplates, those type of things. So if you're going to certify that, you have to have that R endorsement. Then you can sign that off. There's a certain number of things that go with that. And very similar to the ISI, which we're going to get to soon and kind of tie these all together.
That was really good. That's really good. See, I'm happy we sparked that little bit of more knowledge out of you just by saying the word boiler. So,
right. That was a lot actually.
Yeah, it was good.
From the one word. Wow. I guess one other thing before we drop this one is they used to, National Board and API used to have a good relationship. And if you had your National Board, they would give you your 510. Nice little freebie there. Mm-hmm. They don't anymore. So I don't know if there's a divorce or whatever is going on with those two, but they're not getting along anymore. So if you want your 510, you still got to go write it.
Actually, one thing that a National Board that I learned when I was doing my course is for your IS, your in-service stuff or your R endorsements, like you have to go to their headquarters and do the course, don't you? Is that correct? Or is that fallacy?
No, that's a good point. So these guys are funny, and I have hard read on them or what their take is on things. But so you can take a course. I think it's a 2-week course. A lot of places offer it. You can also go to Columbus to their headquarters, and they do the same course. Now you can get your commissioned inspector endorsement with a course from any of these recognized institutes. Now, if you want I forget what they call the individual one, but basically the placeholder one. If you want that, you have to take their course, which is a bit unusual, but that's just the way it is. Maybe it's a way to get you to go do their course. But say you get either one of those two, and then you want to add the repair endorsement. It's another course you have to go take. And I believe it's a week long or 5 days or something like that. So you go down there, and those ones you actually have to do take in Columbus. I don't know that they farm that out to anybody. Yeah. So if you want the R on there and want to be able to stamp repairs, you have to go down to Columbus, take their course, pass the exam, and then they'll throw that on your ticket next to the IS. You'll have an R as well, and then off to the races. You can sign more things.
Perfect. That's what we want, right? More paperwork.
That's right.
So at the bottom, we do have... should we do the NACE stuff first or our regulator stuff? I think we should do the regulator stuff last.
I don't know. It kind of ties together nicely with all this, and then...
you're absolutely right. So
I think we just keep rolling with it, and then if there's time for NACE, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So our regulator, ABSA, we do have a couple, we got a few different, I guess, levels, not level 1, 2, or 3 or anything like that, but there are different certifications you can get for performing inspections in the province. And actually to do pressure equipment inspection, you need to have your 510, and then you need to go to ABSA and apply for their, it used to be called the IPV, pressure vessel inspection ticket. And I guess the next level above that would be your IPBV, but I don't think they call it that anymore. It's
IBPV. B first.
What did I see? IBPV?
Yeah, they like the boilers, of course. That's
I'm
first.
dyslexic. What do you want me to do? And that allows you to inspect boilers. So your IPV is for pressure equipment. Your IBPV is for boilers and pressure vessels there. And you actually need to take the National Board course to get the or IBBV. So it gets a little convoluted. I know we kind of said that, our regulator doesn't really follow National Board too much, but then you need to go take the National Board course to be able to inspect boilers within the province. So,
yeah, they're not recognized in the province, but you have to have the certification to inspect a boiler.
You have to love government logic. So, anyway, they do. I think our regulator also is coming out with a piping one as well, which most likely I think is
it's
a
out now.
PP,
It's
a PP certification. And I think if you have your 510, you can get that PB, or if you're grandfathered into it, right? If we have the IPBV certs already.
Well, they're all encompassing, right?
Yeah.
No, I think you're grandfathered in.
Right.
But if you went today with only an API 510, you're only getting pressure vessels.
Well, the way I see it, so yeah, the IPV and IBPV, that was like the older acronyms, if you will, for some of the more seasoned people listening. So now they just call it the ISI, right? So in-service inspector.
That's right.
And then they'll just rattle off on there what you can have. So there's a piping one now, which I'm not sure what the intent of that is yet. My thoughts are that they're going to make you have that to sign AB83s. So that would be like our piping certification data reports. Anybody is unfamiliar with those? That's what they do in Saskatchewan. They have a similar thing, level 3 or something they call it. And you got to have it to sign whatever their AB83 form's called. So that's kind of my thought is why they brought this thing in. I think that's where they're going. I don't really know for sure. So then like your ISI piping and vessels would be the next one you move up. And then so you need your 510 for that. That's a minimum requirement, and a couple other things, years and whatnot. And then boilers, same thing. You got to have some years of experience and whatever else. And you have to have passed the National Board exam. You don't have to hold the certification. I think they understand that it's next to impossible to hold it, and it's relatively useless.
Yeah.
So then you get boilers. So then they actually list all three of those things. So you can do all three of them. It's kind of how my read on that one. It's three individual things, but they all are all encompassing of each other. So as you like progress through them, you keep the one you had before and you just keep building on it, type of thing.
Yeah, you'll get to laminate a piece of paper that has IBPV-PP certification at the end, and you're good to pretty much look at all pressure retaining equipment within the province. And
yeah, if you have the boiler cert, you can do vessels and piping and everything below it if you want to consider it that way. Absolutely, they have boilers in their name, so obviously that's the top of the shelf for them, and then everything else just kind of falls in line.
Well, it makes sense. Boilers and was it a compressed air cylinder? Not compressed air cylinders, but like air compressors. If you look at industry stats, like those kill the most people out of anything else, right? And people at home. Like, when was the last time you blew down your little air compressor in your shop? There's just moisture collecting in the bottom of that, corroding it. And you think about your mechanic shop or buildings that are older buildings that have boilers in them that, when you go do your National Board course, like those are a lot of the case studies of boilers exploding because, buddy who worked in the apartment building didn't know enough about operating boilers, and then kaboom, and even inspections and stuff like that. And all these codes and certifications come from mistakes made in the past. So they want to make sure you kind of at least know what you're doing. And like we alluded to, once you get your certification, in our opinion, it's you have the baseline knowledge to kind of be able to get around these things. And your quote unquote apprenticeship starts for the inspection portion of it.
Yeah, I would say the ISI is a little exception to that. When you get that one, you're expected to be somewhat of a specialist at that point. So you have to have the resume and the certification just to be able to have a crack at that one.
Yeah.
So that one's kind of the all-encompassing knowledge, if you will. And you made a good point with the the public occupancy type of stuff. So there is a line drawn here. So you get your ISI, you're essentially an arm branch of ABSA. You're somewhat of an equivalent to them. You got to work under like an owner user program. There's some caveats there. Now, one thing you can't do is the public stuff. That's still ABSA's jurisdiction. So if you have your boiler's endorsement, you can't go to the dry cleaner and certify their steam boiler for them or anything like that, right? So there is a line drawn. So you're kind of you have that endorsement, you have that power, but you can only use it under, for the most part, like an owner user cap and what they're allowed to certify. You can't go and do the public stuff unless you get a job with ABSA and you're one of their regulators. Then you can. So there is a line drawn there. So it's not an all-encompassing thing.
No, that's a really good distinction. And there was an incident, I think, in BC a couple of years ago where a hockey arena, it had an ammonia leak, and
Ernie,
and a lot of people, I think a few people died, and unfortunately, obviously it's not in our province, and not to say that BC was doing anything wrong with their regulation of that, but there was a huge kind of demand for inspections of these systems afterwards throughout our province, and we were kind of tied because we can't certify any of their equipment, and we can go and inspect it, and I did talk to the regulator about it, and they were all for us going to look and perform, set up a corrosion monitoring program and stuff on their systems, but it's far and few between. I think what happened there was maybe not unique, but something went unnoticed for a long time just due to lack of knowledge of how the system operated. But like Scott mentioned, like the regulators, inspectors actually have to go and certify this and complete the inspections on them. And as kind of just certified guys who kind of go around doing turnarounds and maintenance stuff, we can't do nothing about it, even though it would be a good opportunity and it might even, possibly save lives. So, there was something else I wanted to touch on that, but I kind of got lost in the mix there. It's trying to be careful on what I said there. So, I don't know. It's kind of neat, but I think in the States, like we said, like insurance companies and stuff, they have inspectors, and it's a lot broader of a thing depending, I guess, on the state regulations. So.
Yeah, state regulators have their different things too. Yeah. So, I mean, we can't speak too much to that.
No, not at all.
At least I don't really want to, but I guess one other thing with these is this is the sticking with the ABSA ISI, this is the cert you need to certify repairs too.
Yeah.
So if you're an owner user company that has a cap to do certain things, whatever your cap allows you to do, certain repairs on vessels and even boilers for that matter, or boiler external piping too. One of the other things with that is you got to have somebody that has a certification to certify the report, the form, sorry. So like the AB40 form, for example, your contractor will fill that out. You have to have that certified by an ISI in-service inspector with the appropriate designation. If it's a boiler repair, you got to make sure you have that. And you got to make sure that's on your cap. If one or both of those things don't exist, then ABSA is doing the certification for you.
Yeah. One other certification that our regulator holds is actually welding examiner. And this person would actually certify B pressure welders and sit there and watch them complete their tests for that ticket. So is that all they do?
Well, so ABSA does the initial B pressure. They hold that one. And then any like performance qualification the welder would do additional to that.
At the shops and stuff?
Yeah, so the shops, even in the field, whatever, that would be this certification they give out. It's a handful of exams. So I guess we can go through the process. That's how this episode's supposed to work. So there's 4 exams. You used to have to write them all 4. Now, if you have enough experience in different avenues, they can knock off 1 or 2, I believe. I think you still have to write 2 at a minimum. But once you write these 4 exams, then they'll give you this endorsement so you can actually issue a ticket to a welder, and there'll be like a W number assigned to your name. You got to put that on there, and you certify them to weld whatever process and whatever ranges you've put on there. So that's something they've extended out so they don't have to do all the welder testing in the province, but they still do the initial B pressure. So when a journeyman welder wants to become a real welder and get his B pressure, still got to go to ABSES, still got to get that. Once that's done, then any of these welding examiners can get them whatever ticket they're looking for.
Yeah. Should we move on to NACE maybe? This episode is going to be longer than our last turnaround episode.
I know, right?
So NACE, this is a pretty good one. Kind of almost leaks back to our 571, if I will, really quick, because the recommended practice from API on 571 is like cliff notes on damage mechanisms. It's gonna tell you, where they most likely will occur, the appearance, what might be resistant to it, what might be susceptible to it. And then NACE is actually, one of the institutes that puts all the research behind it and actually does all this stuff to kind of get the data. So API can just grab it and make, even though the 571 is a no joke book, like it's probably 430 pages, 500 pages of just raw knowledge. But NACE, you can find papers that long just on those specific damage mechanisms. And you can also get, cathodic protection, levels 1, 2, and 3. There's, one of the more common ones is Welding Inspector, right? And that is actually a good certification to have, because a lot of vessels we go into may have protective coating into it. And one thing I'm going to say right now, because I'm grouchy, if you're looking at a vessel with coating on it, do not call it paint. It's coating. It's a coating system. Okay? Just keep that in mind, please. Anyway.
What if it's on the outside?
It's still a coating. Right? You figure out what it is. Unless it comes in a bare, unless you buy it from Home Depot and stuff like that. It's
then
coating.
That's paint? Okay.
That's paint, yeah. Just a little, it drives me nuts when you're talking to somebody like the paint is all messed up on the inside. Like, what do you mean the paint? It's a coating, right? So it's a protective coating. Anyway, so you can get some coating certifications, which are really good. Mainly, that coating one actually complements the 653 one very well, because you will have a lot of your tanks coated. It might just be like the lower portion, or it might be the whole thing, depending on what process conditions it sees or what final product it sees. So,
well, that's a whole industry in itself,
yeah,
too. If you want to be
man.
a coating inspector or nothing else, that's a huge, vast industry. And the 1169 is another one it complements well. If pipelines is your thing, get a 1169, your CIP1, you'll be working nonstop.
Yeah, no, very in demand right now. And that's something that you need a good knowledge base. And just kind of like the one we touched, we didn't actually get into it, though, the API 936, which is refractory inspection. My personal opinion is you do want to have a basic knowledge on the application of this stuff. Yeah, just like the refractory with the coating, you need to learn the base material requirements for cleanliness. You need to know the application, if there's any mixing, even setting. What else? They add hardeners and crap to it. Like there's
surface prep's a huge deal with coatings and that too. Yeah.
So I don't know, anything else. Did I spoil the mood with my coating versus paint?
No, I don't think so. That was good. I would say with NACE, we just barely scratched the surface. This isn't one we can get too deep into. There's a mountain of certs there, and there's a lot of good documentation too. And just a little tip there, a NACE membership is relatively cheap. It's like $100 for the year, and you get full access to every certification they have. So if you're getting into that coding industry, just get yourself an NACE membership, and you can download all their standards for free.
Yeah,
and they're endless. So and a lot, they're referenced all the time, like surface prep, cleanliness. So yeah, if that's one you're going after, it's well worth the fee they charge, and then you got all those code books you can download.
Well, even just for materials, right? Like in the ASME, they reference NACE. And Matt, actually, another good course that we took from NACE was our basic corrosion course.
Corrosion control in the refinery.
Right? Like that was one of the first courses that we ever took. Like that was a really good course, actually.
The NACE basic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went off to Houston there and did the corrosion control and refinery course too.
Yeah.
And it was interesting how you mentioned that 571 was Cliff Notes, because it truly is.
Well, actually, that corrosion one you did, wasn't that a UOP course?
Nope, that was something else.
That was an ACE one?
It was a nice one, yeah.
Well, it's something else if you want to learn more about process, like UOP, it was at United Oil Producers, something like that.
Sounds right.
They're the ones who actually develop all the processes at the facilities that or a lot of the processes we see at the refineries. So if you want to learn what the actual frickin' process is, going to do a UOP course is something that I would highly recommend. It's ridiculously expensive, though, from what I hear.
It is. I went and did the hydro processing one and hydro cracking.
Yeah.
And no, they're really worthwhile and really drilled in specific units. But yeah, they're like 10,000 US a week.
Holy crap. I remember.
Only user inspector.
Yeah. I remember I did a turnaround on the West Coast there, and they had a UOP guy in to come in for their fluid catalytic cracking unit. And wow, like I tried to stick around this guy just to kind of absorb some knowledge from him. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. He knows a lot of stuff. So it's pretty interesting stuff. And I don't know, you may or may not, whether it's legal or illegal, you may be able to find some stuff on the internet and kind of read up on it, but use your discretion on that, I guess. I don't know what else to say. But if you can get your hands on some stuff, read it, absorb it, and apply it. So what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, that's the bottom of the whiteboard, and this is by no means an all-inclusive list. I think this is just a lot of the certs that we run into and we overlap. So, I mean, I think our intent here was just to lay out some different certifications, what you can go after. Some of these things you can't get right away, APS endorsements, national board, and that. You got to work up to those. But regardless of what role you're in, you kind of want to have a bit of an idea of what all these people are doing, especially if you're in like an owner inspector type of role. You want to know a bit about NDE, you want to know a bit about, a CWB and what that entails and where that applies, things like that. So it's good to have a good base knowledge of all these things, regardless of where you are. But I mean, there's a lot of information available on the websites if we didn't do a good enough job explaining how to get these certs. But this was our intent, and I don't know, hopefully it was enjoyable, informative.
Yeah, I think it was pretty good. Actually, one thing I wanted to touch base on was when we do actually receive NDE reports, it's normally a level 2 who does the review on them, but it's not a code requirement. Is that my understanding correct on that? That's more of a just a company kind of thing. They make sure that they have a level 2. And
that is a standard requirement too. You have to be a level 2 to interpret any results. So a level 1 can do the work. They now are supposed to be directly supervised by a level 2. But either way, that report has to be signed by a level 2. So if you're one of these people reviewing the reports, make sure there's a level 2 certification along with that person's name. Otherwise, they aren't properly qualified to be making those calls.
So if a level 2 does the initial inspection, they don't, by code, need a secondary reviewer. They likely have the certification and the competence to sign their own report off.
That's right. They might have an in-house company review type of process. They do, but yeah, all they have to be is a level 2 to certify it, and then whoever's receiving that has to accept it. So that's kind of where your 2 signatures. What you're supposed to do is somebody receiving it, and then whoever made the calls is a level 2. And quite often you'll see like an assistant's name or something. That might be the uncertified guy that's learning, that type of thing. No,
that's just something that kind of popped into my head. It came up at one of the facilities I was working at, and we were talking about accepting reports and whether or not these level 2s, obviously the level 2s, but level 1s can do thickness readings by themselves. Yeah, the one exception would be UT. That's where a level 1 can do something. Any other UT they can't do anything other than the work. Yeah, but they can't certify anything. A level 1 UT is the one certification where a level 1 you can actually sign your name to something and it's legit. I feel like we breeze through this still, and I don't know about a sign off on this one. What do you guys think? Do we want to touch on anything else?
I don't know. I guess
Depends if you want a 2-hour episode.
Yeah, it's getting pretty long. It is longer than our turnaround ones now. Like, this is probably our longest episode ever, actually.
Yeah, it's getting up there. I mean, depends on how many certs you want to chase around, but just don't forget they all come with renewal fees. So you get too many of those. Maybe if you want them all, space them out 6 months apart or something like that. So it's not one big hit all at once.
Top tip.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys are enjoying the podcast as usual. Share, subscribe to the podcast. Hit us up on the website or Instagram, LinkedIn if you guys have any questions or any episode ideas you want us to cover. Thanks a lot, and see you guys later.